I mean, seriously, 2013 Wattpad called, they want their opening scene back. What's up, book nerds? I'm Lucky's Universe, and in this week's video, I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of October. Now, some of you may have realized that I never did a September edition of my month in books, and for that, I'm sorry. Sometimes I go through periods where I lose all motivation to do anything, and that includes make videos. I did actually film a September wrap-up, but when I reviewed the footage, I was so low energy, the content was not it, and I just didn't want to give you guys subpar content. But I'm back and I have some more energy. I do not, however, know how long it is going to be before I plunge back into the dark abyss of my mental issues, so let's get this done while I still can. Alright. Let's get into it. Okay, starting off strong with a book that I rated 5 stars, The Binding by Bridget Collins. Not gonna lie, I bought this book on a whim because the cover was pretty and I really enjoy books about books or books with a really strong book theme, just like one of my all-time favorite books, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. The Binding tells the story of Emmett Farmer, a boy who discovers he has the power to bind people's memories into books. One day he finds a book with his name on it and unlocks an ocean of memories that he never knew existed. I wasn't sold on the writing of the novel for like the first quarter. I thought that the author was overly fond of metaphors, but it was the premise of the book that made me keep going, and I think over the progression of the story, the writing improved. Or I just got used to it, I don't know. Either way, it happened. I didn't expect the romance to be so well developed and heart-wrenching. I'm a sucker for forbidden love, and when two characters go through a heck ton of yearning and then are separated by an uncontrollable force, it just hits me in the feels. The protagonist, Emmett, grew on me. I didn't like him much at first, but once his backstory was introduced, he gained a lot more emotional depth. I thought that Lucian was a brilliant character from the beginning. A man of many mysteries, and he had a very dashing, romantic feeling to him, which worked in contrast with Emmett's roughened character. Plus, if you're looking for a book with LGBTQ+ characters, nay, protagonists, then look no further, you have come to the right place. It is so hard to find an adult fantasy novel featuring LGBTQ+ characters that aren't used as token characters or have their entire personality defined by their sexuality. Honestly, this does bear a lot of resemblance to The Starless Sea, but I feel that The Starless Sea was maybe a little bit more complex than The Binding, but anyway, it was really, really good, rated at 5 stars. It has a permanent spot on my bookshelf. I wasn't really that into the book when I first started reading it. I mainly chose it because I thought that the movie trailer looked really good, and I always prefer to read the book before I watch the movie adaptation. The Hate U Give is about an African-American girl named Star who witnesses her best friend getting shot unjustly by a racist police officer, and the ramifications of that incident and the effect that it has on Star, her family, her friends, and the Black community in her town. The first chapter was, I mean, seriously, 2013 Wattpad called, they want their opening scene back. The main character arrives at a party, she's in a hoodie and jeans, hair in a ponytail. She feels so out of place because all the other girls are in dresses and makeup. Alas, our main character just isn't like other girls. Ugh. It was pretty much the promise from other friends who had read the book that kept me going. Eventually, it began to improve and I ended up rating it 4 stars. There was some weirdness in the dialogue. There were a lot of chunks of dialogue where the characters were speaking and I wasn't really sure how the dialogue contributed to the plot or to the character development, but there were some really important topics covered in the book. The dad was by far the best character. The dude rocks, and for a hot minute I thought he was gonna die because all of the best characters in YA always died, but I'm glad that he made it to the end. All in all, this book makes a lot of important points about race and the justice system, the clear racial bias when it comes to law enforcement, and the emotional/psychological effects of that bias on teenagers. I think the story did a great job of communicating those ideas in a way that would make sense to young adults, because in the end they are the most important demographic in our society because they are the ones that are going to grow up and change the laws. Like I said before, I love books about books. I don't know why, it just gets my bookworm pages turning, and I've never read a bad book about books, you know? There's something so intriguing to me as a book lover to read a book about books that has stories within stories and multiple characters across multiple timelines who are all connected in some way, and just the barest hint of romance that I find really exciting, and that to me is just like the algorithm for a favorite book for me. 10,000 Doors of January is about a little girl named January Scholar who grows up under the care of a collector who sources artifacts from around the world, and he sends January's father around the world to collect these artifacts, so he's never around for January and her mother is dead. January has always had a very active imagination and a passion for adventure stories. And one day she comes across a book titled The 10,000 Doors of January, which reveals a lot about her past and details the existence of doors which allow people to cross over to other worlds. I thought the writing was lovely, with a very skillful change in narrative voice whenever it switched between the writings of January and those of her father. It can be really hard to distinguish between characters if they share the same tone and pace and phrasing. However, in this novel, it was clear that January, who loved to read and read adventure novels, had a more story-like flow to her writing, whereas her father, a scholar, had more of the tone that you would come across in a scientific paper. I will say that the pace was kind of slow in the beginning. I was way over a quarter of the way through the book before I really had a good grasp on what the story was going to be about and what was going to happen. Also, the author had a tendency to overuse the term rubbed raw. She kept describing all of her characters as being like emotionally rubbed raw or physically, and it got kind of a bit repetitive over time, but I think this was the only phrase that I noticed that she overused, so everything else was fine. All in all, I really enjoyed this book, and I can't wait to source my own personal copy to have on my bookshelf. I used to love reading Maria V. Snyder's books when I was a kid, particularly her Glass trilogy. So I was really excited to read a young adult sci-fi novel written by her, and this was actually one of 5 YA novels that a lovely person over at Harlequin Australia sent to me. This YA sci-fi is about a girl named Lyra who is the daughter of 2 space archaeologists, and they live in space. And she's been dragged around the universe by her parents for as long as she can remember. She travels with her parents to a new planet where they discover some weird space stuff is going down, and then she also meets Niall, who is a security guard slash love interest. Honestly, Navigating the Stars was a pretty generic read, but hey, every now and then, I like some good, straightforward genericness, okay? It's predictable, it's easy to read, and when you finish it, you don't feel like you just stepped off a roller coaster. I quite liked the main character, Lyra. I thought she had a good narrative voice, but sometimes her character could be a little inconsistent. Like, she was supposed to be bad at maths, but she was somehow able to solve a mathematical code in seconds when the dozen scientists around her couldn't. And the adults in this novel were all as incompetent as each other. It didn't make sense to me how they were all scientists and trained guards, yet Lyra pretty much figured out everything on her own and did all of the planning for them. I guess it just made the whole thing a little bit less realistic for me, seeing as it doesn't seem altogether plausible that a 17-year-old girl who has barely finished high school could operate on the same level as scientists who have studied for decades and military personnel who have studied for the same amount of time, you know? I could believe Lyra prompting them to approach a problem in like a new way, or maybe adding her own flair to their plans, but she basically did everything for them, and I guess I didn't quite understand how she was able to do that. Not to mention, Lyra's mother wins the award for the worst mother of the year. I don't know about anyone else, but I interpreted her behavior as highly manipulative and oftentimes selfish. I mean, she made her daughter move to a new planet, knowing that because of Winky Wonky spacetime, all of her friends would either be dead or really old by the time that she got to this new planet. She has absolutely no faith in her daughter, frequently dismisses her, and allows her 0 opportunities to become her own individual and establish a personal identity. Niall was a hard sell for me, mainly because the only other person that I know who's called Niall is Niall from One Direction, who's like short, blonde, and kind of dorky. So I kept imagining him instead of like the tall, dark, handsome security guard that Niall was supposed to be. But for the most part, Niall just kind of kept out of the way. He came in for a bit of romance here and there and then just disappeared, and like, I'm fine with that. He was totally fine for me. This sounds like a lot of negatives, but I swear I like this book. I disagreed with some of the characters. The characters in the plot were generic, but like, I was in the mood for generic at the time. Now I kind of want to read the rest of the series, and I ended up rating this book 3 stars. Crown of Coral and Pearl is another YA novel that Harlequin sent to me, and it is a fantasy story with an ocean theme. Crown of Coral and Pearl is about our main character named Noor, who grows up in a waterbound village of sorts and has never set foot on land because her people are forbidden. Her only chance of ever leaving the village comes in the form of a rare ceremony in which the most beautiful girl among her people will be chosen and sent to the Land Kingdom to marry the king, the future king. Noor and her twin sister Zadie have been preparing for this moment their entire lives. When ill fate befalls Zadie, Noor is sent in her sister's place to wed Prince Seren, who is cold and heartless and just altogether not a good guy. Whilst there, Noor finds herself drawn to Seren's half-brother Tamlin. It's Talin. As far as the plot goes, the story was pretty basic, but I thought the writing was well done and I really liked the characters. Noor is altruistic, but not insufferably so, as many YA protagonists tend to be. We aren't given a continuous inner monologue about how kind and caring and not like other girls she is. Instead, the author just lets Noor's actions speak for themselves. Talin was a little bit underdeveloped for me. I didn't feel that much of a connection to him. He didn't get that much page time. And thus I found it hard to understand why Noor came to have feelings for him and why she trusted him so much over Prince Seren when she really just didn't know him. I really hope that he gets a bit more of a personality in the coming books because he's pretty vanilla at the moment, and we all know what happens to vanilla guys in these YA novels. There's a reason I keep accidentally calling him Tamlin. Now, I know I'm supposed to hate Seren, but he's kind of the best thing about this book. At first, I was apprehensive. Seren to me seemed like a pretty one-dimensional villain. He was set up as the bad guy from the beginning and didn't seem to have much motive for being the villain other than like he's just a petty bitch. I prefer my villains to be more well-rounded and have more complex layers to their cruelty. However, his character really progressed as the story came along. He gained a lot of emotional depth and turned into a really intriguing antagonist, and I hate to admit, I'm kind of rooting for him. The dynamic between Seren, Talin, and Noor reminded me a lot of Maven, Cal, and Mare from the Red Queen series. I really thought that Seren was going to turn out like Maven, like boring, no real motives for being evil kind of thing, but he impressed me, his character developed well, and he turned out to be really good. I really hope we get to explore Talin and Seren's relationship a little bit more in the coming story, because Talin seems to have a teensy bit of love and respect for his brother, even though I couldn't understand why, because like everyone else in the book thinks he's a dick. I'd really like to see Talin struggle between his feelings for Noor and his love for his brother, plus I just really love complicated family relationships. Also, I hope that this isn't the end of Seren's character development. I hope the next part of the story isn't just going to be Seren bad, Talin and Noor good. I really want Seren to go back and forth between good and evil, you know, and add a bit more complexity to his character. In summary, super good read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Can't wait for the next book. 4 out of 5 stars. In conclusion, I read a total of 5 books this month, and none of them sucked. In November, I plan to get through at least 3 more books. I just finished reading a historical fiction, and then I think I'm going to smash out the rest of the YA novels that Harlequin sent me. And I also went to the op shop, or thrift store if you're American, and bought some more books because I have a problem, okay? If you don't already follow me on TikTok, go check that out. I post some pretty cool stuff on there. I will also leave a link to my Twitter and my Goodreads account below if you want to keep up with what I'm reading. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you later.